All right, for more on this, we're now being joined by Chris Doyle, Director of Council for Arab-British Understanding and also the current lead spokesperson. He's also a member of the Royal Institute for International Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us on WION World is One.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, Mr. Doyle, I want to begin by asking you, how do you assess the situation and how it's unfolding at the moment? We're seeing what's happening in the West Bank and in Jenin. Do you think there are two angles here that I would like your clarity on? One, Donald Trump has lifted the sanctions on Israeli settlements here. Also, now that the ceasefire is in effect in Gaza, do you think now Israel is recalibrating its resources in the West Bank?
In my view, and many others who are long-term observers of this conflict, what we will see in 2025 is a shift from Gaza to the West Bank as the core of the military elements of this conflict. That is, that Israel has essentially smashed Gaza. It's damaged or destroyed 60% of the buildings. You know, there's barely anything left, and there's a huge question about reconstruction. But it's the West Bank that is really at the heart of this conflict, the territorial dispute, because it's here that the most extremist government in Israel's history, has its real eyes on. This is the piece of real estate that they truly want to get their hands on. Now, remember that there are over 270 Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank. That means that there are 700,000 Israelis living there illegally, a violation of international law. And in doing that, it is the position of most countries that is a really massive obstacle to peace. How do you get to, for example, a two-state solution if the state in which you hope that territory will be, the state of Palestine, has so many civilians from the occupying power living there? And what we are seeing over the last few years is an escalation in those settlement activities to increase the number, the footprint, the number of buildings, but also a huge amount of Israeli settler violence towards Palestinians, aided by the Israeli armed forces, to push and harass Palestinian communities, particularly in more rural areas, to leave, to gather in the bigger cities, so you get more of the population corralled into urban centres and more territory for the settlers. And this is where it's all going to happen. And that is why the settlers have felt so encouraged by Donald Trump's lifting of the sanctions on settlers and settler organisations, in the belief that he's going to back them in this enterprise and that Israel can actually go forward with annexing this territory to be part of the sovereign state of Israel.
Right, and just for better understanding here, so you do believe that this has something to do with Donald Trump being sworn in and, of course, lifting sanctions. So the focus has essentially shifted from Palestine to West Bank, Gaza to West Bank.
I think it has, and it will do. It's not that Gaza's just going to stop there. I think there's a really delicate situation there in terms of moving from the first phase of this agreement that was agreed on the 15th of January, came into effect on the 19th. Now, there's 42 days of that. There's going to be some hostage release, some detainee release as well as part of it. But when we get to the somewhat more trickier stages, phase 2 and phase 3, that would see an Israeli withdrawal, that would see the reconstruction of Gaza, the Israeli government, including Prime Minister Netanyahu, has made it very clear that he is not going to rule out resuming military activities in Gaza. But I think strategically, the shift, the focus and the energy will go to the West Bank, because this is where Netanyahu and his colleagues will feel that they can grab an historic strategic victory over Palestinians and deal a mortal blow to the Palestinian national movement. I don't think that will happen. And even if they did annex the West Bank, what you're going to get is a movement for equal rights. It will move from a movement that tries to end an occupation to one that will be far more similar to what we saw in apartheid South Africa, of demanding votes. Because, of course, those Palestinians under occupation who would be annexed are not going to be given the rights of citizenship and voting within the state of Israel, but they will be controlled and occupied by them.
Right, and in fact, I also wanted to discuss the comment by Donald Trump yesterday. He did say that he wasn't very sure that the Gaza ceasefire deal will hold. How do you assess that?
Well, at one level he is right, but the disappointing part of that comment is that he is not committing himself to ensure that he does. He's rather washing his hands of it. He's got a situation in which 3 hostages were released, very welcome, just in advance of his inauguration. He's got the photo op. But it requires the United States to put pressure on Israel, as by far the more dominant actor here, the occupying power, to ensure that this agreement goes forward. And his comments in saying it's not our war, it's not our business, which, is quite hard to square the circle when the United States is giving so many billions of dollars of weapons and diplomatic and economic support to one party in a conflict to say it's not our war. They're an active part of it. The fact he's not saying we need to see this deal implemented, I think is very worrying. Because if the United States did that, then we really could be talking about getting to a proper ceasefire and even then forward to a peace process. The more optimistic side would be that Donald Trump wants a deal, ultimately. He wants to do a deal, he wants to get a Nobel Peace Prize, and if he wants that, this deal has to go forward. It has to be implemented.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Doyle, thank you so much for joining us on WION World as One with your insights on this. For latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.